How quickly do they develop and that sort of things?
Oh, they develop in days. They're very fast in developing. Just like most of the fly larvae can be very quick, hours to days.
Welcome to the Purr Podcast, your favorite feline-focused podcast, where we dive into all things feline, medicine, surgery, behavior, and of course, a sprinkle of veterinary gossip along the way.
I'm Dr. Jolle Krippenstein, feline fanatic, surgery nerd, and self-proclaimed lover of all things awkwardly cat-related.
And I'm Dr. Susan Little, proud cat vet, podcast enthusiast, and your guide to the wonderfully weird world of feline medicine. Let's get started.
Yes, it's so nice to talk about screwworms.
Yeah. Let's not screw it up. So, no, Mike, this is great. This is the Purr Podcast, and we have a special edition. Dr. Susan is not here. She is in England, by the way, at some kind of conference, or she's floating around somewhere. But I think that she is very sad that she'll be missing you, because you are always one of our favorite guests
Favorite.
At the Purr Podcast. And we wanted to do this because there is a lot of information about the screwworm. And now I have to, I don't know if I say this right, but let me try this. The Cochleomia hominivorax.
I cannot say it at all. So I think we should make a joke out of it and say we're going to call it New World Screwworm.
New World Screwworm. Wow, that's a good one. Yeah, because and you hear so much about it because on the one hand you hear about the cattle, and I think there's now 2 cases in Texas. Used to be below our borders. It looks like it's creeping up a little bit, and you hear about dogs as at risk. But I want to specifically talk to you about the risk. Is there any risk for cats here? So let's start with the beginning. What are we talking about?
Well, Dr. Jolle, it is another one of those kind of classic bot flies that lays its eggs in wounds, and then their larvae hatch out of the eggs and then ingest the tissues in the area that they were deposited.
Right. So, but that's called meiosis. That is pretty normal that you have. As a matter of fact, in some really early time surgical practices, they use these larvae to clean up the wound. But this worm is a little different, isn't it, than just the normal fly, meiosis that we see. What is a big difference here?
Yeah, I think the really big difference for our audience is the fact that these larvae actually feed on healthy tissue, which is not the case with most larval meiosis. They're only cleaning up the dead tissue.
Right.
This one likes the healthy tissue, and it really can progress and cause severe disease, potentially even death.
Right. And so this is just a larval stage. So this is a fly, isn't it? It looks like just a normal fly with big red eyes. But can you tell a little bit about the stages that we're talking about here? So you already said something about a wound. They put eggs. I think the fly puts eggs in the wound, and then these larvae start.
Yes.
How quickly do they develop and that sort of things?
Oh, they develop in days. They're very fast in developing. Just like most of the fly larvae can be very quick, hours to days. And it's amazing that they don't actually need a big wound to lay their eggs. It can be, just a tiny little thing, like maybe you'd had a mosquito bite that you'd been scratching, and just a tiniest little break in the skin. Then those eggs can be laid by the flies and ultimately turn into the larvae that then eat healthy tissues, which is again why they're so dangerous.
Yeah. So if you look at the little larvae itself, they have these big hooks that they can. They're looking really nasty. So that's probably what they use to destroy the tissue. And you said it really well that normally meiosis or maggots cause damaged, but they normally go only feed on dead tissue. So that's why they clean these, they clean these wounds in kind of a semi-natural way. The bad thing about this is that because they're so sharp, they damage the normal tissues too, but leads to bigger wounds. I mean, some of the pictures that I've seen are just unbelievable, especially in cows and that sort of things. So what is the risk for cats?
Well, the risk for cats is just the same as it is for most other warm-blooded mammals. Obviously, the attention is on cattle, dogs, the occasional human, but cats are definitely susceptible hosts for this particular larval stage. And so cats that would be allowed outdoors, that would be in an area where the flies are living, and if they had an open wound that the flies could lay the eggs in, the same problem, damaging tissues, progressing to severe disease, just like a cow, a dog, and rarely a human.
Right. Although cats obviously are grooming animals, so in the beginning, the fly is gone. They might be grooming a little wound. You don't see it that fast, but then suddenly this wound appears much bigger and growing. They gave some numbers about that. It can take like 7 days or 7 to 10 days for an animal dies from this disease if you just let it go. So when should people get worried about it?
I think that right now, living in most of America, we wouldn't have much concern. But as we've noted, the CDC website is great. The USDA website is great. It's just the fact that it just keeps moving north. The screwworm is now through all of Central America, Mexico, and now these 4 cases, that have recently been reported within 1 week. So it's led to a lot of media attention.
Right.
So that one county, Andrews County, I believe, in Texas, has gotten a lot of attention. Right. Now, the dog actually came from being in Mexico and then came back and probably brought the larvae with them. But as we all know, borders are artificial, right? They're just lines on a map. And so it is all just a continuum. It's really great, though. The CDC is actively working on this problem. It's considered a real potential problem for the future. So there is a response team working on this right now. The good news is for cats is, like you said, they are pretty good groomers. And so it's a little bit harder for them to develop maggot infections in areas that they can reach.
Right.
So the grooming can be bad because they can make a wound that have the eggs laid in it. But the other good parts are they're pretty good at removing things on most of their bodies.
Right.
But as anybody that's on the call that knows about cats, has been a veterinarian or other veterinary healthcare providers, we see maggots in cats. Right. And so they can't control it any better than perhaps other species. Probably a little bit less likely to become infected than a cow or a dog, just because of their grooming habits are much more developed. But it's not 100%. So yes, those of us that live in those areas with cats that are allowed outdoors, the risk is real.
Right. And for people that are not veterinarians, what should they do if they have a cat in Texas that have maggots? I mean, I know the answer, but say you can say.
Yeah, I think Yola and I would both agree. Anytime you have a sick cat, you should see a veterinarian.
Right.
And if you see a wound that has little white things wiggling around in it, you should go to the vet even more quickly. Just drive safely. If you have a car crash, your cat won't do well either. But seriously, they should be treated as quickly as possible. And that's one of the good news, I think, for our podcast today, right, is that we've now already have an emergency authorization for a routinely available treatment for these maggots.
Right. Can you say a little bit about that? What is that treatment?
Yeah. There's a commercial product that's called Credelio cat, and it's from one of our big 5 veterinary companies in North America called Elanco Animal Health, and they did apply for and got emergency authorization use of their product, Credelio Cat. Lotiliner is the active substance that can be used to help manage the infections.
Okay.
We're still going to clean the wounds and gently remove the maggots that can be reached, obviously, but it is great to have emergency treatment as well.
Right, right. And so that medication kills the larvae, don't they?
Yeah, but you do want to remove as many of the larvae you can without crushing them, because
Right.
they do have all sorts of toxins and things as well,
Right.
all maggots. And so
Right.
we have to be very gentle in removing them so we don't lead to systemic reactions in the kitties. But yes, the oral medication, Credelio Cat from
Right.
Elanco, will kill the leftover maggots.
Yeah, I also thought that NexGard combo might be
Yeah.
approved. Right.
Yeah. I think NexGard combo, and it may have already been approved. I didn't
Right.
look again yet today, but
So there
yes,
might
that
be
whole
two.
class of drugs
Right.
would be potentially effective.
What if you have a cat with a wound? What should you do if you're in that area or
Yeah.
outside of that area?
Yeah, if it's a wound that is going to get well pretty quickly, it's probably not a bad idea if you lived in an endemic area for this fly to let it recover while indoors.
Right.
We see these flies can come indoors, but they're not indoors like they would be at the levels outside. It's so tempting to say have cats live indoors, period. But as we know, they didn't evolve that way.
Right.
Cats living outdoors is still a good thing for many of them. And so I wouldn't go that far, but definitely watch your outdoor cats for wounds and get them taken care of by a veterinarian quickly.
Right. And I understood that screwworms used to be in the US, but they were kind of, I don't think eradicated is the right word, but I think they were moved away because of a really interesting way how they did it. Can you tell a little bit about that?
I'm not sure that I know which one you're talking about.
So I think that they're trying to have sterilized flies.
Oh, of course.
Right.
Of course. Oh, yeah. No, that's been one of the most effective management techniques, is releasing sterilized flies. Thus, they don't make new baby flies,
Right.
which lessens the risk. So it was an actual good biological warfare, right?
Right.
That helped eliminate this parasite from that part of the world.
Right. I think that the interesting thing is here that we're not treating really the larvae or the disease. We're treating the cause of the larvae and the disease, which are the flies itself.
Yeah.
And as you said, a border is a border. A fly is not going to say, okay, this is the border. I see a big wall and I'm not going to fly over it or through it. No, it will just pass that. So, and we have seen this screwworm slowly creeping towards the US border. And I think probably countries in Latam are already been used to it. So when you talk to people there, they're pretty much used to it. But for a lot of a lot of the US veterinarians that listen to this podcast, and even the owners that hear a lot about the news, this is really good information. So for that last question, sorry.
I was
go
just
ahead.
going to say, but it's very important, and we need to stop the progression and hopefully have it work its way south again, way south, so no one has to have this problem. The point is, we still probably don't need to panic and do anything rash for our pets at this stage, but it is just wise to keep an eye on them, let them and see your vet if they become sick, especially with wounds.
Right. And for vets, it's important to know that this is one of those diseases that you have to let the government know if you have a case like this. So
yes, definitely reportable. So the veterinarians listening to the podcast, if you suspect you have a case, call your local public health representative and or the USDA.
And it's required within 24 hours. So just this is one of the diseases that has full attention of the government right now. So don't sleep on it. That's for sure. I have. I'm just going to test you a little bit. There is a new term that I hadn't heard about, which is bobcat fever. Do you know about that?
I know about a bobcat fever, but I'm not sure which one you're talking about. I mean, there's the old bobcat fever,
Right.
cytoxin felis, which really makes the bobcat sick. So, which one are you talking about today, Dr.
Yeah, so
Kirpenstein?
I thought that there was a increased awareness regarding bobcat fever, which is a parasitic disease, which is the cystozoan felis indeed, but it seems to be that it's a little bit more common lately.
Yeah, well, I'm glad that you and I match on which bobcat fever we wanted to talk about. that
Yeah,
you
this
know,
was a test and you passed. Well
well,
done.
thank gosh, you made me a little bit nervous there, but I didn't want the audience to see me embarrass myself on tape because you would never delete it. You would just let me be an idiot across the
I
world.
would never do that. You know that. I'm always there.
Hey, but you know what happened to me? I think the audience may be interested, or you can cut this. I was in Oklahoma,
Yeah.
God's country,
Oh
working on my
my.
sister's house in
Uh-huh.
Guthrie, Oklahoma. And I had 3 attached amblyomma americanum ticks over the
No
course of the
way.
5 days. Yeah, they're sneaky. I had a larva and 2 adults over the course of that week. And since amblyomma sometimes, which is one of the tick vectors of cytoxin,
Right.
it also can be a vector for Rocky Mountain spotted fever.
Oh
So I
my God.
might have taken a double dose of doxycycline. Of course, it would have been
You
prescribed
might
by
have.
a medical
Okay.
doctor.
Yeah. So don't do this at home. This is not advice that we give, but yes. So yeah, I thought it was funny because the Lone Star tick is one of the also the carriers of this bobcat fever. So, and we're talking
Yeah,
about Texas now as being one of those poor states that are hit
yeah.
one after the other, because the third thing was the avian flu. I think the latest news was that there was a cat that might have infected the owner in relatively recently in the news. I know we talked about this topic already earlier, that there's nothing to worry about, but now this is the first time that they really have shown that this virus, because we have now talked about worms, parasites, we have talked about protozoa. Now we're going to the viridae, so we're hitting almost all the the geni in what can go wrong in the world. Can you talk a little bit about that latest news?
Yeah, that latest news it's very similar to, remember, just 6 short years ago
Right,
talking about SARS-CoV-2,
right,
the owner infecting the cat then infecting another person.
right.
Well, that was, our excitement 6 years ago. Now we know of one case, right, where SARS-CoV-2 from the owner infected the cat that then infected a vet. Well, we've had this particular influenza virus has been with us now for many, many years, but the current United States problem for at
Right.
least over 2 years. It's still quite unusual that your cat would be infected from ingesting, say, poultry products or unpasteurized milk, or living on a dairy farm, becoming ill and shedding enough virus to infect you.
Right.
It's still much, much more likely that you would be a case worker working with flocks of sick animals, working with a heavily infected dairy herd, or yourself drinking unpasteurized milk or undercooked
Don't do
poultry
that.
products. So think of yourself as a cat. In this
Right,
case, drink pasteurized milk. Make
right,
sure that you uh, cook your meat, especially if it's chicken. And
right.
and if your cat has signs of disease, respiratory or neurological, like we talked on a previous podcast, you would have an extremely small chance, but a chance that you become infected.
The good news here is that AI will not take over your job, because there's so many new infectious diseases coming up every day. And will keep you in the saddle for a long, long time. It sounds like it.
I think we're going to be fine on that part of our jobs. But
Right,
again, these things are all really interesting. But
right,
as you've probably seen, none of these are thought to be the next pandemic.
right.
I mean, SARS-CoV-2 was horrifying, and but thankfully the feline and avian influenzas, at least with the variants today, are probably not going to be the next wipeout of 20% of the world's population. But
Right.
a mutation could happen tomorrow, so we might have
Yeah,
to have
and
another
what's
podcast.
happening in DRC right now with Ebola, that's probably not a really good thing, because although they say it is not as virulent as the other Ebola viruses, it's still going around there very, very quickly. And that is, for me, very, very worrisome, I have to say. Ebola is a
Yeah, yeah,
horrible disease.
and definitely more contagious than the
Right.
other pathogenic ones. So.
Right. But there's no Ebola in cats that we know of. So that's the good news for cats. And we are cat lovers. So let's focus on the cat and not on the human. Going back to the screwworm, I really appreciate your so quickly jumping on this podcast with us. I know that this is a question that a lot of people have. I think the CDC is the best source of information for all this information, or all the different types. I do notice that, because the world seems to get a little warmer, that a lot of the diseases that we used to have only in the South or in Mexico or in Latam are now crawling up a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. And I really want to point out that I only got to ski 5 days this year.
Oh my gosh, you're kidding.
Yes.
In
Very
Colorado?
important. Parasites spreading around the world and not having enough snow to ski. It's been a bad year. Screwworms.
Oh my, this
God.
is world news. Forget the screwworm. Wow.
Mike only got to ski 5 days.
I know. This is the first time I hear this. I'm so sorry for you. But anyway, Mike, this has been wonderful. I don't want to take too much of your time because you're at ACVM. You're listening to amazing lectures from everybody there. Thank you so much for joining us at the podcast. And hopefully I will see you really soon live. And say hello to everybody there in Seattle. You're in Seattle right now, aren't you?
Yes, sir. And I will tell, there are many people that love you and will be missing you and Susan. So I'll make sure that they all know I got to see you today.
Exactly. Especially Steve Dale, if you see him. Just tell him.
Yes, I will remind him. I have enough.
This is the Purr Podcast, where we talk cats, laugh a lot, and learn something new every episode. Together, we bring you the latest updates, surprising cases, expert interviews, and just a touch of chaos, because nothing with cats ever goes as planned.
So whether you're a seasoned veterinary pro, a new grad, or you're just here for the cat puns, you've come to the right place.